The Cleveland Browns are in an unlucky situation. This team is a good one on paper by having a top-tier NFL offense, but competing in the NFL's second best division will pin their upside to a low ceiling. I'm Chase Keller, and tune into this dive of the Cleveland Browns, why I believe they will finish 7-10, and how they came up in 18th in my 2023 NFL Power Rankings. The Cleveland Browns offense is the best part of the team, and both head coach Kevin Stefanski and general manager Andrew Berry have built the offense perfectly to match the typical run-first scheme. With the run game being so great, the pass game is often overshadowed, and honestly, it's not that bad at all. With no positional groups worse than average, let's dive into this offense. The quarterback room in Cleveland, or in better words, Deshaun Watson, is going to have a step up in 2023. I understand that Watson returned from a massive hiatus that debatably should have been longer, but his performances weren't great, bad enough to be outperformed by Jacoby Brissett. Sure, Brissett set the bar high, but these performances were very unlike Watson. He passed for 1,102 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions in 6 games. And that goes without mentioning that he completed only 58.2% of his passes. Yet, we know what Watson can do. And when he last played in Houston, he was one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL. So what you can hope to get out of Watson for 2023 is a step closer to his Houston days. The backup quarterback is almost a toss-up at this point. I have Joshua Dobbs at QB2 for now, but I can also see Dorian Thompson-Robinson or Kellen Mond taking a shot at it. A run-first offense needs great running backs, and while they lost Kareem Hunt, who's still sitting in free agency, this group still stands at a good level, and that's obviously because of Nick Chubb, one of the NFL's best. He sits at my RB2, tied with Christian McCaffrey and behind Derrick Henry. When you look at his skill set, he can work in a gap scheme, he can work in a zone scheme, he's always going to be dominant. In my opinion, his best trait is his ability to bounce off tackles and break these tackles with ease. He is always exposing the play strength of opposing defenders. Along with that, Chubb has fantastic field vision. 7.6% of his rushing attempts were breakaways, and over 500 of his 1,500 yards came in that same category. What comes behind Chubb is what holds this running back room to only a good room, but it's obvious that all Cleveland needs is Chubb. Jerome Ford and Demetric Felton both come in at a 58 overall on my board, which brings his running back rating down a lot. Add on that Felton may switch to wide receiver, and this could be a lot worse. If you want to know how this whole rating system works, by the way, it is in the description below. Continuing on though, I did say that all Cleveland needs is Nick Chubb. If he gets hurt though, you're going to want good injury support, and that's not what Cleveland has. The wide receiver core is actually the worst group on this offense, but it still sticks at average. There's one talent that has proven himself as a true wide receiver 1, and with a lot of this room having starting upside, this core could easily improve with great QB play. Let's start with the known. Amari Cooper is a worthy wide receiver 1, and he has been that way since he entered the league in 2015. He's athletic, he's got some of the best route running in the league, and he has physical traits. So he has the traits to potentially be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. I just need to see more consistency, as with Cleveland in 2022, you look at the stat sheet, he was way too inconsistent. You probably know a lot about Amari Cooper, but you maybe don't know as much about wide receiver 2 Donovan Peoples-Jones. I actually loved Peoples-Jones as a prospect, and I believed he was a massive steal in the 2020 NFL Draft. He's been that high-end wide receiver 3 talent for a couple years now, but he hasn't elevated to the next step just yet. Yet he's shown enough flashes where I'm confident he's going to make that step up eventually. Peoples-Jones is a very nice deep threat with upside everywhere else, given his combination of his 6'2", 204 frame and his near 4'4 speed. He even caught 16 passes for an average of 20.9 yards his rookie season. Competing at wide receiver 2 is new pickup Elijah Moore, who Cleveland acquired via trade in March. Moore isn't as fun to me as Peoples-Jones is, but Moore can still play at a high level at some points, and I can even see him being worked as a Deebo Samuel type player in 2023. I need to see that happen first. For now, he hasn't given me enough reason to upgrade his rating. Behind these three, you have the speedy veteran talents in Marquise Goodwin and Jakeem Grant, who actually match what Elijah Moore can become. Their speed and return ability can help develop Elijah Moore into that main, reliable returning guy once these two leave. Two more things to note before I move on. David Bell is actually tied with these last two guys at a 66 overall, and I'm also really not a fan of Cedric Tillman. He's actually my wide receiver 8 on this roster at a 58 overall. Yes, I had Cedric Tillman at an early 7th round grade in the NFL draft. The tight end group isn't much better than the wide receiver group, but it's filled with pass catchers who can help Watson return to his old form. David Njoku's 2020 breakout was an amazing thing to see, especially since I predicted it. He saw 6 or more targets in 8 games last year, and that number increases to 11 when discussing 5 or more targets. He also caught 73.4% of his passes last season, and that just shows that he's a reliable pass catcher. He was also very great in deep ball opportunities, so I am begging Stefanski to use him more in the deep game this season. Like, he can genuinely act as a wideout. Jordan Akins has also shown flashes of great receiving tight end ability during his 5 years in Houston, especially in 2022, where he had career highs in yards and touchdowns. His QBs had a passer rating of 124.1 when targeting him. That may seem like an okay, cool kind of thing, but his QBs were Davis Mills, Kyle Allen, and Jeff Driscoll, so that's actually really impressive. Harrison Bryant was a guy I really liked as a prospect, but he hasn't given me enough to like him more. I do still like his upside though, given that he's an improving pass blocker and has shown flashes as a receiver. The rest of this tight end room is likely going to be cut, and if Cleveland chooses 3 tight ends, it's very clear that these 3 are going to be that final 3. Now, the offensive line is known as possibly the NFL's best. While I do prefer a couple of teams, and it's primarily due to my first talking point of this line, it's hard to ignore that it's elite. So my first talking point is left tackle Jedrick Wills, who receives the long-awaited first breakout grade on this roster. My reasoning sounds so stupid, so prepare yourself. Ready? He's got to break out at some point, right? He's been good enough to be a starter on this line, but he hasn't taken that leap to greatness yet. He's stayed at a good skill set for his entire career so far, and with the potential he has, a breakout is bound to happen at some point. What holds him back to being great is that he isn't a good run blocker, which is also what Cleveland really needs. Yet, what I'm looking for in a left tackle is blindside pass blocking, and that's what Jedrick Wills can do. The rest of the line lines up perfectly. It's filled with elite run blockers with pass blocking upside, and that goes without mentioning that 3 of the remaining 4 guys are under 30 years old. Let's start with quite possibly the best guard duo in the NFL. Joel Bitonio is known as an elite pass blocker, but his run blocking has been constantly developing, and he's actually been at least a top 5 guard in the past 3 seasons. And my only knock on Wyatt Teller was that his 2022 season was a downgrade from seasons prior. Nonetheless, he was quite possibly the best guard in the NFL in 2020, and followed it up with another great season in 2021. Even Jack Conklin, who hasn't been too good since 2020, is a better run blocker than pass blocker. Ethan Posick had his best career season in Cleveland in 2022. Sure, that's easy to ask when you note that he wasn't a starting talent while with Seattle, but he actually played like a top-tier center in 2022 with, guess what? Great run blocking. This rushing attack is going to continue to be deadly for years, and no, that doesn't mean Nick Chubb is overrated because of this line. And all of this is why Kevin Stefanski, who isn't a great head coach in the grand scheme, is perfect for this Browns offense. Stefanski's scheme has oddly evolved the last couple of seasons, adapting to the offensive talent that he has surrounding Nick Chubb, or I should say, whatever they have in the passing game every year. He's always found ways to appeal to the quarterback, yet still makes rushing first priority. Unless there's a 3rd and long, switching to pass is just common sense there. If you watch my channel, you will know that I'm not a fan of run-first offenses, which is why I don't like Kevin Stefanski as a head coach much. Sure, his rushing offenses are always elite, But when that doesn't get to work and the pass game can't get to work because he's not great with pass coaching, this team loses. To summarize, this Browns offense sits near the top of the league. Now, I want to see more out of Deshaun Watson to ensure that this offense can be great at all times. So now, let's discuss the defense. Despite being worse than the offense by a good margin, the defensive side of the ball is still sitting around average compared to the rest of the league. They may have been 20th in yards allowed last year, but by making big splashes in free agency, along with losing only 2 starters, this defense definitely improved. The positional group that improved the most is the edge group, which has been searching for that reliable second edge rusher to complement Myles Garrett. They had to go with Jadeveon Clowney the last 2 seasons, and before then, names like Vernon Oliver and Chad Thomas had their go as starters. I mean, just look at Myles Garrett. 16 sacks the last 2 seasons, 12 the year before that. Consistently top 10 in league-wide pressures. This man is a beast in the pass game. He's disruptive enough on the line that his run defense is also fairly good. He's constantly finding ways to disrupt everything using his elite combination of size and athleticism. I'm sure all of you guys have heard enough about Garrett though. What has Cleveland done to completely ensure that Garrett has the second edge rusher? Well, I'm going to go out of order of events to go in order for overalls, if that makes any sense. We'll start with a guy who was acquired via trade less than 2 months ago in Za'Darius Smith. I don't think people are talking about this trade enough, as he is generally an elite pass rusher. Recently, he just finished 3rd in QB pressures with 55, 6th in pressures with 80, and 19th in sacks with 10. Throwing it back to 2019, he actually led the league in pressures with 105. And his run defense may be okay, but all you really need to do is put another great pass rusher beside Garrett, and you have an absolute deadly rush duo. This also appeals to new defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz, who I'll discuss here in a few minutes. And I feel bad for their third edge, and Ogbonnia Okoronkwo, who they just signed in March. He had a career year in the pass rush in 2022, as in just 268 pass rush snaps, he recorded 36 pressures, 25 hurries, and 5 sacks. Why do I feel bad for him? He played on Houston last season, and he finally had the opportunity to start on a quality defense until Za'Darius Smith came in. So now he will sit as the injury supporting rotational piece on this Steed line. The interior defensive line isn't too good, but it could be much worse, given that it has heavily improved since last season. Last year, they ran with Jordan Elliott and Taven Bryan. This year, they already made a huge step up with the signing of Dalvin Tomlinson, a 6th-season veteran who has never had a bad season. Tomlinson is actually one of the most consistent linemen I can think of. He's more notable in run defense, but he's actually made strides in the pass rush over the past few seasons. He sat at 30 pressures last season, which was his career high in that stat. And now on the other end, you got Maurice Hurst, who hasn't played more than 300 snaps since 2019. I had to start this with something concerning. He's actually elite when he plays. He forced 30 hurries in 2019 when he last played over 300 snaps, which was 11th in the NFL. Hopefully his unlucky injury history doesn't continue, as he missed all of 2022 with a bicep tear. Even the draft selection of Siaki Ika is going to be impactful. Sure, I did think that the pick was a reach, but he's still an absolute bulldozer and an intimidation to any opposing blocker. I do have my concerns with his upside, primarily considering his athleticism, but he should be a good rotational guy. And maybe you noticed that Jordan Elliott isn't in this top 4, but let me let you in on a secret. He's not roster caliber. Sure, he's improving as a pass rusher, but his run defense has not been good. I believe that run defense is the most important aspect in an interior defensive lineman, but you can make up for that with elite pass rushing ability. And he just has improving pass rush ability. We get a little more negative with the fact that this linebacker core is the worst group on this defense. It's not for terrible reason though, as the room is well put together, they just need someone to develop into a linebacker 1. Does anyone remember when Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah fell to the late 2nd round and everyone had called him a steal? Well, he's playing like a second-round pick so far, but he hasn't blossomed into linebacker 1 status yet. His coverage, which was his best trait coming out of college, is the first thing that's starting to blossom into eliteness. He is very good at holding receivers to a short gain, but he also allowed 3 touchdowns in 2022. Also, he has suffered 3 injuries, and that was a big concern out of him coming into the league. Then there's Anthony Walker, who a lot of people think is better than where I have him rated. He was sitting in the mid-60s until a great 2021 season put him up to a 71. After suffering a torn quad 3 games into a good 2022 campaign, he stayed at the same overall. His coverage is easily the best trait of his game, and while he may allow a high percentage of targets to be caught, he's even better than Jock at refusing this extra yardage. There's also Sione Takitaki, who's been average while starting, but he's continued to be that reliable linebacker on the inside, rarely having flashes of poor play. Even behind him, there is Matthew Adams, who saw his best season by far in 2022, and undrafted free agent Mahmoud Diabate, who I had an early 5th round grade on. So this linebacker core isn't bad because it's incomplete. It's bad because there's no true linebacker 1 that has developed into that role yet. The cornerback group sits as the second best positional group on this defense. Ward is a little overrated in my opinion, but he's still a cornerback number 1 talent. His 2021 season was a nice one, and he's consistent at allowing low passer ratings. But for 2022, it got a little messy. He allowed 35 receptions. Pretty good. He allowed 59.3% of his targets. Pretty good. But you see that he allowed 15.5 yards per reception, and that's not so good. He got burned a lot in 2022, and that's just a testament to his deep athleticism starting to get exposed. He also allowed 6 touchdowns in 2020, so just know I'm not cherry picking. I've been skeptical for a while. Yet, as I said, he's still a cornerback number 1 talent. After that, we dive into an underrated corner and 3rd-year player Greg Newsome. He wasn't drafted in the 1st round for nothing. He's another starting caliber cornerback that keeps this room afloat. He took a slow step forward in 2022, but that slow step was enough to have him allow a passer rating of 89.2. He also allowed less yards on nearly 100 more coverage snaps when you compare his rookie season and his sophomore season. Martin Emerson was a pleasant surprise to me in 2022, as I thought he was a reach in that draft. I saw him as a late 4th round selection, and he totally proved me wrong. Allowing just over 50% of targets to be caught, combined with 9 pass breakups, shows he has the upside with a great combination of lockdown coverage and ball production. The safety room is an under-average room, but that's never a bad thing, given that the cornerbacks are above that. They made more moves to improve yet another room, which gets me thinking. Was Cleveland's free agency a top-tier free agency? I'll talk about that later though. Let's talk about Juan Thornhill, who wasn't great with Kansas City, but has always proved his reliability in a defense that wasn't the focus of the team. Thornhill is another great coverage guy, and he allowed an outstanding 58.7% of his targets to be caught, impressive for a zone safety. So when you look at that, this Browns secondary can actually end up being very special in coverage. Even signing Rodney McLeod was a great idea, and guess what? He literally had an elite year in coverage in 2022. He may be 33, but the statistics show for themselves. Yeah, that's elite. And then we have a break in the coverage guys. Potential nickelback Grant Delpit has always struck me as a potential Derwin James in terms of role, but not impact. And he's shown that when he's healthy. He's actually best at attacking beyond the line of scrimmage, whether that be rushing the passer or tackling the runner. So yes, this safety room is fine. They just don't have a guy who can be considered great in this room. There's one more thing that makes this defense promising, and that's the hiring of new defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz. I thought this hiring was great to try and replace Joe Woods, as not only do they upgrade, but they get a coach who is better at manipulating talent. The personnel will stay the same, but he's going to utilize the front 4 the most. With the edge group being elite, this is a great sign for the Browns defense. The signing of Dalvin Tomlinson was perfect for this situation as well, and honestly, this Browns defense has the upside to be elite with Jim Schwartz at defensive coordinator. To summarize, This defense could have been a lot worse if it wasn't for a fantastic offseason. So all of these improvements elevate this defense to the top half of the league. So now I'm going to show you guys the rating splits. So before I end the video, I'm going to go over the ratings for offense, defense, special teams, and coaching. As I said before, if you're interested in how the rating system works in these videos, it is in the description below. Getting started with offense, they had a 78.51, which is 7th in the NFL, 5th in the AFC, and 3rd in the AFC North. The defense had a 74.41, which is 14th in the NFL, 9th in the AFC, and 2nd in the AFC North. The special teams had a 69.62, which was 28th in the NFL, 15th in the AFC, and last in the AFC North. And the coaching came out at a 74, which is 28th in the NFL, tied 15th in the AFC, and 4th in the AFC North. As an overall team, they received a 75.3, which turned out to last in the AFC North, 11th in the AFC, and 18th in the NFL. So that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I have 17 more teams to talk about, so you're missing out. Once again, I'm Chase Keller from Chase Keller Journalism, and thank you guys so much for choosing this channel as your source of sports coverage. I'll see you guys in the next video.